Welcome to Everyone Loves Guitar, where we get to sit down and talk with interesting professional guitar players and related music industry experts. If you love playing guitar, stick around. You're in the right place. Hey everybody, this is Craig Garber from Everyone Loves Guitar, and we have a really cool guest with us today. We're with Angus Clark, who is we actually went to the same high school, it turns out. I'm like 5 years older than Angus, but that was kind of funny because it was like a nerd high school. It was not a music high school. Anyway, Angus is currently living in Jersey. He graduated from the Bronx High School of Science. He went to University of Southern California as an electrical engineering major on a scholarship. He had a summer job at Right Track Recording. This is while he was in college during the summer of '86. This is back in New York, right? When you were in college, but on summers when you're off. Is that correct?
Correct.
Right. I took about 300 words to say something that should have been done in 6. During that time when he was working on Right Track, which is a studio in the city, he worked on records by Whitney Houston, Billy Idol, John Waite, Carly Simon, and Bruce Springsteen. And he also played video games with Bruce, which was an amazing summer for him. After that, he played around, and he's still playing video games. He played around New York City, and then he headed back out west to California, then back to New York City. He eventually got the job as Kitaro's lead guitar player in his touring band, and every record they made together was nominated for a Best New Age Album Grammy. You were like a good luck charm, man.
It's a real small category.
Yeah, it's all right. Something is 100% of something. You know the deal. They toured Japan, China, Indonesia, Thailand, Taiwan, Singapore, Malaysia, Germany, and Spain. And they filmed, they made a PBS special. He got to take insanely long guitar solos. He had a guitar rack the size of a refrigerator. And he had a Pink Floyd quality light show. He also had a Tibetan, how do you say that?
Tibetan.
See, this is one of these intellectuals, man. I can't have this. He had a Tibetan guy in the band. That's someone from Tibet. I should have just said that. And the Tibetan guy invited Angus to play with him on the Beastie Boys Tibetan Freedom Concert at RFK Stadium for 75,000 people. That was in Washington, D.C., correct?
Yes.
Yeah, that was awesome, man. Around 2008, Angus got a call from Jonathan Mover about doing a team building gig, and they went and did it. This is like a corporate team building. He went and did it, and he wound up enjoying the process so much, he wound up partnering with this company, which was called SongDivision, to grow the business in the U.S., and that's a big part of his time and energy today, and we'll talk about that. Between Kotaro and SongDivision, he then wound up working with the Trans-Siberian Orchestra. Are you in East or West?
West Coast.
So do you come to Tampa then, or no?
Yes.
You do? That's what I thought. Cool. Along the way, he's done a bunch of other fun gigs. He played on Rock of Ages on Broadway, which was great. And the band was so good on that show that since they closed, they now are a band doing gigs. He also made a couple of solo records and a couple of band albums with his band called Daredevil Squadron. Now, again, he spends most of his time running SongDivision, writing and recording his own music when he has time, doing some instructional videos with TrueFire, and playing around town with artists he enjoys working with, and raising kids, man, right?
Yeah, one kid.
Raising, that's still enough. Someone said to me last week, he said, I don't have any kids, but my cat is my kid. I'm like, man, with all due respect, give me 10 cats. And it's still less work than one kid, And I've raised 3, so I know. His biggest influences are Hendrix, Gilmour, Tony Iommi, Randy Rhoads, Michael Schenker, and Richie Blackmore. These are like the whole soundtrack of my youth, man. Very cool. Man, thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
I will watch my grammar and my, what is that called when you hesitate? Like that. When I just said, what is that called? I forgot.
I don't know. There is a word for that, and I don't know it.
I know. I'll watch both of them. Anyway, you were born on the borderline between the Upper West Side and Harlem. Then you went to high school in the Bronx, but then you went out to California. That was a pretty big move, I think, and which, as you know, like nobody does that.
Yeah.
No, seriously. I mean, you're like going to school in the Bronx. Where are you going to school? Syracuse, DC. You may have someone going to Washington University in St. Louis, but nobody says, "Oh, I'm going to USC." What prompted you to do that? I thought it was really cool.
That is one of maybe 2 or 3 moves in my career that we could talk about that were prompted simply by reading a magazine article. I think probably guitar player, which I grew up loving, and don't read anymore. But they wrote an article about top 5 or 10 music programs for guitar. And of course, Berkeley was there, and University of Miami was there because they were pretty hot right then. Steve Morse had come out of there, and some other fusion guys. And then USC had this studio guitar program that was highly rated. And I was also, for some reason, under the impression that Tom Schultz was an electrical engineering major, which he wasn't. He was a mechanical engineering major. And I wasn't the hugest Boston fan, but I thought, well, there's a guy who's done both things. He's a smart guy. He's like a science nerd and a proper rock star. Like, let's go to a school that has a decent engineering program and a great guitar program. And I got extra scholarship money for going as an engineering major. And I figured I would just soak in the goodness of the guitar program. And it wound up being an asset because I changed my major like halfway through my second semester, because college level physics required this amount of algebraic math that somehow Bronx Science had left me wholly unprepared for, even though I think I took AP calculus, but I couldn't be sure. I know I took AP physics with Mr. Gordon. Do you remember Mr. Gordon?
No, I had this old lady, man. She was about one step away from death. I don't know how she was still functioning. I mean, she was so old. I actually used to go in and feel for her. I felt like, and then I sometimes would think, what happens if she actually dies in here? Like, we're not prepared for this. You know,
that would be rough. So it was an interesting combination of, as much as I feel it was a really weird decision, it was, in my own internal logic, it was well thought out in some ways. And it took me a while for me to give myself any credit for making an okay decision there. Because most of the people that I knew from grammar school and high school went to something in the Northeast, in Massachusetts and
upstate New York, Long Island. Yeah.
And it was all, when I look back on it, and advice I give to people is that look out for yourself socially. Like, go someplace where you'll be comfortable making friends and stuff. I was not very socially adept and comfortable with a lot of the people that I wound up at school with in USC. It was a very different vibe. You know, that was a
East Coast, West Coast, you mean?
Yeah, there's the East Coast, West Coast thing. That was also like, I didn't even know what it was, but USC is a really good school now, but it was, and I had a scholarship, but it was like and I don't want to say anything bad about it because I got a great education there, but at the time in the 80s, it was like a rich kid's school, you know. It was it was like very, there were lots of people were just going down by the pool, like, you know, the girls would be by the pool, like, you know, in jewelry and sunglasses and stuff, and just hanging out. And, you know, it was a lot of people just kind of, there's a big frat scene, all that. And it just, I didn't know what it was. I was like, what are the frats? It's like, oh, you know, it's a lot of guys just paying to live in these huge houses and have these friends and do ridiculous stuff. And I was like, I don't know anything about this. So it was really strange. But the music program was kind of isolated. There was a lot more commuter students. So I started to know a lot of people who lived in LA. And so that was really cool. So once I shifted to music, I found some really good friends in the music program, and there were some great players, and, you know, they're guys and girls that I went to school with that I still am in touch with, are still, you know, active players, and are still valuable resources for me professionally. So in terms of what you look to get out of a college education in the long run, I got all those things. I got, you know, a valuable network of people who are still active in the field that I work in, and I think a great education. Although if you just want to talk about guitar education, what I got from USC was very different than what I got once I came back. If we want to jump ahead here, but I came back from USC and I enrolled at NYU, and there my teacher was from the Berkeley, had been at Berkeley and done all the Banacos stuff.
Yeah.
And when I was at SC, like we would study with these guys who were like, you got to just listen to Wes Montgomery. That's all you got to do. Just listen to Wes Montgomery. And I was like, I love it. It's great. I'm not sure. I can't make that sound. Like, can you tell me what's going on? I said, well, let's look at these Charlie Parker lines. And like, we're trying to deconstruct these things with no real method to it. Like, I would play a verbatim Charlie Parker line and the teacher would be like, that was a cool line. And I was like, well, okay.
Should be. It was Charlie Parker's.
And then the next lick would be something that I thought worked. And it'd be like, yeah, that's not that, and it couldn't tell, and it can't tell me why one or the other. But what we did get at USC, and I brought this up in another interview I just did, was one of the teachers was Mike Post's top call guy. And he would bring the charts back from like playing Magnum PI or like Larry Carlton played the theme songs and then the head like for the first season, the pilot, and then this guy Steve Watson would go in and he would be the weekly player for that, and he would bring the charts and he would put them in front of us and we'd have to read them down. And that was cool because they weren't jazz charts. They were, pop rock charts, but the rhythm reading and everything was really intense and it was really good for us. So I got a lot out of it in that way. But in this thing of it was studio / jazz, and the way, if you look at the amount of jazz chops that like Lukather and, like Larry Carlton, obviously, mostly jazz player. Sure. And then like Lukather has really deep harmonic chops, and Mike Landau and all these guys that that have taken that that 3 stages of a session guy in LA. It was always used to be like calling, and I don't know if this should be like, you'd call Lukather as a new kid and say, yeah, can you sound like Larry Carlton on this? And then he would come and sound like Larry Carlton, and he does enough sessions, and then it's like, we want Luke to sound like Luke. You come in and sound like Luke, and then they're calling another green guy and telling him, can you sound like Luke for, a third the price that Lukather's doing? Yeah. Luckily for, Steve, of course, has this amazing career as an artist, so he doesn't have to worry about being replaced as a session guy, right? Yeah, totally. But when I got back to NYU, it was like, this teacher was a guy named Bruce Arnold, and he had studied with the Banacos thing and gave me all the approach note lines and all that stuff and just how it worked with the arpeggios and the approach notes and all that stuff. And I was like, this is like gold to me. I was like, that's amazing. I had it because it was a real system. And when I was at SC, me and the other rock guys who were just secretly just doing nothing but practicing Yngwie licks like the whole time they're trying to show us Wes Montgomery, we would just be like, sweeps and we were just like, can't you just show us the jazz secrets? Can't you just show us the secrets? Yeah. Because we're not going to listen to like the entire Wes Montgomery catalog. And that's a classic thing about higher education in the arts these days, is that it's very hard for them, or at any point, the guys that come in with that stuff already together are the guys that graduate. They want the degree for whatever reason, familial connections, there's some parental pressure. Like, yeah, you can play guitar, sure, but you have to have
just get a degree. Yeah.
Right. If they have that, some reason to do it, and then the institution is making their reputation off the backs of those guys who came in playing it just, like just a 10% difference between where they came in and where they left.
Yeah.
The maturity has changed and the exposure may have changed and stuff. And they've had that much time to kind of work it out before throwing themselves full into the mainstream. But that's what these institutions are making their reputation on. There's nobody that came into one of these programs like an infant and came out.
Larry Carlton.
Right.
I get, it's interesting you say that about like school out there, because I had a really hard time when I went to school too, for the same reason. Here I am coming from the Bronx, and I was with, everybody seemed to drive a Camaro. Like I was
different car culture.
And this was just up in upstate New York, and the girls looked like women and they all had their nails done, and it was just like I didn't have a clue what to say, how to fit in, or I was lost, man. I was really like, and I remember people it was like to the point of ridiculous. They'd say, "Oh, you're from the Bronx. Were you in a gang?" And I'm like, look at me. I'm a fat, chubby white dude. Do you think I was in a gang? What? Doing what? Robbing candy stores? I mean, what the?
Anybody who thought they knew anything about New York, when I told them I was from 110th Street, they were just like, oh, that's a bad area. Because they were just told like anything above 96th Street is terrible. And then the other thing was that I got to college in Los Angeles and didn't know how to drive. So I didn't.
Oh, yeah, because you don't need a car.
Right. And so people were just like, yeah, you just show them your driver's license. And I was just like, so I had to get a state ID.
Oh, my God.
And then say, well, how can you not have a driver's license? I mean, you can get your learner's permit at 16. And I was just, I'm from New York. Oh, you're from New York. It was immediate, great way to bring it up. No, but the other thing about California was, there's no pizza.
Oh, really? That's problematic. It's like, what did you eat? What was the college?
Well, that was the dawn of my relationship with street tacos and chili burgers and everything else you can name. It's like I was like, what happened? I thought California was the land of eating Brussels sprouts and like all this kind of healthy eating. And I go out there and it's like, no, man, you got to go to Manny's El Loco and they get 5 burritos in a bag. And, nice. It was great. All that kind of, all that real, Southern California Mexican food, much different than like the mission style burritos, where they put the rice and beans all in the burrito. That's a Northern California thing, because I think it was done for workers who wanted something they could carry.
Oh, interesting.
Because a Mexican burrito is in LA. It was a very small thing. It was just like the meat is wrapped in the flour tortilla, and then the rice and beans are on the side, and it's covered in stuff and served on a plate. So there you go.
There you go. Get it all here.
Things I learned in college.
Why did you get a master's in NYU? Or was it really you were just looking to get what you missed? It almost sounded like the way they taught it was like, I don't know if you've ever gone to counseling, but the difference between, let's say, like a therapist that's a social worker and someone that's like a doctor, like a psychiatrist or a psychologist. If you go to a doctor for therapy, they sit there, they will say a fucking nothing. They will literally say nothing. And you go in there, like when I went to therapy, it's like, man, I need some guidance here. I might as well read a book, right? And you go to a lower on the academic level, like a social work, and I found this pretty consistent. Even if it wasn't a fit, they're more open, they're interactive, and they talk, and they're like, oh, here's some suggestions. It's almost like NYU was your social worker, and those other guys were like your psychiatrist or your psychologist kind of behavior, which is a totally nutty analogy, I know, but that's the thing it reminds me of.
It was weird. Like the head of the USC program was an old school session guy, like from the Tommy Tedesco kind of era, playing on movie soundtracks and stuff. And he had gone headlong into some pedagogy, and he had a way of organizing the fretboard because he had talked to me about the I don't know if you've heard of this thing, the caged system.
Yeah, of course.
For learning.
Yeah, most people, I think that most people listening to this, I think, have heard of that.
Yeah, so that was the first time I ever heard that, was when I got into college, and it just reminded me of the line from King of New York, where Christopher Walken says to Lawrence Fishburne, he goes, "You never came to see me the whole time. I was in the joint." And Lawrence Fishburne says, "I didn't want to see you in a cage, man."
First of all,
that's my take on the cage system.
You can't use words like pedagogy here. This is not the SATs, Angus. So scrap that, please.
But so he had this whole system of organizing the neck. So there was a whole lot of like fundamental neck learning going on, and there was Steve Watson was a proper, modern studio guitar player, kind of really giving you this. But the jazz instructor was Paul, who's passed, but both Duke and Paul have passed away now. And Paul was my private teacher for the bulk of my time there, and he was just more of an intuitive player. He was like, he loved Hendrix, but then he loved jazz, and he just didn't kind of relate to the fact that there was no jazz crossing my turntable the whole time I was growing up, and it just kind of can't. They just kind of feel like that's this. Without that commonality, he needed some system to get that
absolutely stuff
into my hands and ears and playing and everything. And if you talk about, everybody says like, your tone is in your hands, this whole thing, but really like your tone is in your ears. Your ears are seeking out something and your hands are executing it for you. And it's built off of what you listen to. And I think that with the Bonacos thing, you are using your hands to train your ears, because you play those exercises and then it starts to make sense. Like, oh, okay, I'm starting to hear these sounds come out off the guitar, and then you can start identifying them in records, and you kind of have to work a reverse feedback loop in order to get that stuff to happen, because they didn't grow up with it. And we're really just all made of the things that we fell in love with at 13. Like, that's it.
Yeah,
like,
musically, yeah.
You cannot escape it.
What was Bonacos' first name? Because I want to talk about him, because I don't want to make sure people who don't know who he was. Charlie Bonacos. Yeah, that's right. Now, he was a guy, correct me if I'm wrong, that was in the Massachusetts, maybe?
Yeah.
And was a very famous teacher, and he would make tapes for people, or he had tapes and he would give you them, and then you'd have to send back an assignment or something like that?
Yeah, I think he was one of the first that day's version of online learning. It was like remote education. He would just make tapes, and you would send him a tape, and then he would critique it and send you another thing to work on. And I think his primary instrument was piano, but his whole system was available at, I don't know if he taught at Berklee College of Music, but his whole system was available there. And Mike Stern was fully embraced that, and that's what he brought to jazz guitar and fusion. And Mike Stern was hugely popular at that time when I got back from college. So I left for college in 85 and I got back in 89. And at that point we just had I had a couple of Mike Stern records as being like kind of you could go see him at the 55 bar. But I didn't really love jazz. I can't say that I had fallen in love with jazz. I just knew that he was a cool character, right? Like,
I never saw him, never met him.
And I really loved, I don't know. There was just a scene like Hiram Bullock in the late night band, and Mike Stern, and there's this kind of a New York-y thing going on, and I had gotten to LA a little too late and a little too young for that whole scene that created Motley Crue and all these guys that made all those guys. Because if you read the books like about Motley and Slash and all that, those guys got to be rock stars because the CD had come out and the music industry was flooded with money.
Right. And shit exploded from the CD.
Right. Mm-hmm. So people were rebuying back catalog and the labels were sitting on a ton of cash, and those guys reaped the benefits of that. Plus they worked their asses off. Yeah, of course. Absolutely. Right.
Of course.
But it's a point that I can't remember if it was Slash or Nikki Sixx. Like if you read the Slash autobiography and the Heroin Diaries, and I haven't read The Dirt on Motley Crue, but I think if you read those all within 6 months of each other, like you get this overlap of crazy stuff and stuff. Yeah. So I read Heroin Diaries and the Slash one, and so there was all that money in the system there for those guys. So and the NAMM heroes had taken over the guitar magazine covers, right? So like you have proper guitar heroes who did groundbreaking stuff. You had Eddie Van Halen and Randy Rhoads and like Zach and Slash, and then you had the NAMM heroes who were the guys who were kind of like these product demonstrator selling guitars for companies,
Hamer guitars or Jackson or Charvel, stuff like that.
Yeah, and you had those guys kind of own that magazine cover thing, and those guys still own the magazine covers
to some extent. Yeah, they do.
It's fascinating to me. And so like I was a little too young and a little too late. So 85 to 89, I would go see Racer X. That was like
haven't heard that name in a while.
Oh dude, it was so good. It was so good. Yeah. It was, I mean, they never made it, but like going to see them was just amazing. Like they put on just an amazing show. And you had Bruce B.A. and Paul Gilbert. It was like watching a double image because they were like so fast and so tight and everything. It was great. And so I still wanted to rock like that, but it was not really. It was hard to be a person that wanted to do that. At that time.
Well, there was nothing educationally that was going to support that. That's the problem. It sounds like.
Well, I don't think that you needed something educationally, because I'm talking about when I got done with college.
Okay.
It's like, let me find a band, and that's when I found those guys, Naked Sun.
Let's talk about that because, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you there, but I wanted to talk about them. It seemed like from what I read, there was a ton of potential with that band, and I wanted you to share your experience or share your story about that.
Yeah. So I get back to New York, and I can't remember. Well, I get back to New York, and I was playing in a band. I think I had a band of my own with guys that I went to high school with. And then I had done some playing. And I sought out a couple of teachers. And one was like a New York based guy. That was before I started, studying with that other guy, Bruce Arnold, who gave me all the Bonacco stuff. I studied with this guy, Bill, and he had a band with these guys that were in a New York avant funk, thing. And that band was called Liquid Hips, and there was guys that were used to be in D-Funk with Jeff.
So you've known Jeff a long time.
Yeah.
Holy crap, that's wild.
So my first year at NYU, my teacher was a guy named Richard Bucas, and he referred me to be a teacher for the National Guitar Summer Workshop, and I went up there and taught there, and that's when I met Jeff McErlane.
But he was in Liquid Hips too, I think, wasn't he?
So yeah, so I was. So then I'm trying to remember all the connections here, but like part of the reason I went to NYU was because on their literature, it said that, John Schofield was an instructor.
Okay.
But it turns out that at NYU, getting a master's degree is a completely retail transaction.
Oh man.
And all of the faculty are adjunct. So like whoever's going to be there is completely up in the air. And like we show up for class and the guys are getting paid by how many students they have in the class. They go, give me this card. I want to make sure everybody here gives me this card. You know, it's just like, why? It's like, cause he's not going to get paid if we don't
Oh my God.
completely adjunct, but legit jazz guys. So it's kind of good, you know?
Anybody good that you got anybody's
I have a guy named Jim McNeely, was a great piano player, who I studied some composition with and everything, and real open-minded guys. Like they could tell I was not like a jazz guy, but he would still be willing to give me, look, why don't you try this? And, it was really nice. It was really good. But so I was really disappointed that Schofield wasn't there. So I asked a friend, I was like, who's here in New York? And he directed me to this guy, Bill. And Bill Bickford was in Defunct. And then he was doing Liquid Hips with John Mulcairn. And so I went and I was in Liquid Hips and, recording demos with John and stuff like that. I don't know, for like a year. And then I met Jeff over the summer of whatever that was, 90 probably. And then Jeff and I were sharing an apartment in Brooklyn. And that's when the guys in Naked Sun wound up needing a guitar player. So Naked Sun were signed. There were a bunch of bands signed out of New York by like RCA and BMG affiliated labels. And they were mostly like sleazy, like East Village, kind of Guns N' Roses-ish kind of stuff, black leather and a little bit of punk vibe and like
East Village is very punk.
Yeah, Spread Eagle is one of those bands and like bands like that. And so
sorry, that's a funny name, man.
Yeah.
Hey man, come see Spread Eagle. What?
So Jeff and I would go out with some regularity to the Limelight or the Cat Club or whatever, and like, just meet people and this and that. And so the guys in Naked Sun, there were two guys and they both had these huge manes of curly brown hair and Van Dyke beards. And I think it was all Frank Zappa inspired, which was lost on me because all I remember about Frank Zappa was like a family friend of mine, like their kids were into music and they played the Apostrophe album. And I remember I was like, yeah, it's like comedy albums, right? Frank Zappa thing, like Yellow Snow. And like, that's all I knew about it.
Yeah.
It was like, so I just never really wasn't.
You got to have a taste that's an acquired taste, I think, Zappa.
Yeah. It wasn't my thing. I mean, he's obviously a legendary musician. And,
sure.
Really smart and funny. So these were the two founding guys in Naked Sun, and they would be out together like with this identical look, like all the time, you'd see them everywhere and stuff like that. And so they were signed to a German label called Noise, distributed by BMG. And they put this record out and it got really well reviewed in Kerrang. And
is that still around?
I don't know.
That was like when that came out, that magazine. And I don't know, was that limited to the East Coast? Because everybody on the East Coast knew about it, Kerrang. But it was like when that came out, it was Nirvana because it was like, I don't know. I somehow felt it was the real heavy metal. I don't know why.
It was British.
It was British. Yeah. It seemed like these are legit guys. And I'm sure all the stuff they got there from us, they were like, these are legit guys from the States. It's always like that. The out of towners know smarter than us. They got the inside secrets.
Right. So they, and I can't remember all how my phone number wound up with them. I think there was a girl involved. And then, so I wound up auditioning for them. So I was learning the tracks off their record, and it was really like, it was proggy, but in a kind of an older Genesis, and actually what they were hugely into was Van der Graaf generator, which I had no exposure to. But there was a Jethro Tull vibe to it that I loved, like, because there was some really poorly played saxophone on the first record. And then,
so like some Renaissance oriented stuff.
No,
like
it was folk. There was stuff on the War Child record by Jethro Tull where there's like horns and stuff like that. Yeah. So some things like that, like arty prog, and like this was around the same time, that like bands like, or specifically Dream Theater was like being formed, where they were like mixing. Prog was more Rush meets fusion, like the Dregs.
Yeah.
Meets something heavier like Metallica, like that thing. Mm-hmm. And like those three bands that I just mentioned are not influences of mine at all. So whatever band, is brought by those influences, you can imagine would be like not my thing.
Yeah.
But these guys were like arty prog, like the art school thing, like Floyd, Yes, Genesis, and that stuff, and Jethro Tull, that stuff was like deeply, my thing. Like, loved all that about it. So they made this great record, and I had to learn those tunes, and that was kind of one of my first periods of like, I am going to prepare this to death, and I'm going to go in there and play the crap out of this audition because they have a record deal, and I never got a record deal with the band I had with my buddies in high school. And I never got a record deal out of anything that I was a principal writer on. So I'm going to go join a band that has a record deal. And I got the gig, and then they're like, we got to go down by the Noise label office, okay. We go there and it's empty.
Oh my God. Man, you can't catch a break here, man. Oh.
So we go down there and they're like, and we're like, hey, we came to see if some of our CDs and photos are here. And there was a shared space with some other label, and they're like, yeah, you can go in. There hasn't been anyone in there for weeks.
And this is after you prepared for all this stuff.
Yeah. So then Naked Sun were left kind of looking for another deal, and in hindsight, it should have been like, okay, because at that point, like, I loved Pearl Jam because their first record was awesome.
Oh, it's incredible.
And I thought Nirvana were just okay. So I was kind of alone in that regard. I really should have just like cut my hair and bought some flannel and went back to focusing on songwriting, right then. But there's only one way to get here. So that's not what I did. Yeah. So we stuck it out. So this was the dawn of like the DIY, like you could get an ADAT and a mixing console and we had a space in Williamsburg, like before Williamsburg was like, is what it is now. It's like, and we made a record in this rat infested space in Williamsburg. And then, we went out to LA to showcase for some A&R guys out in the West Coast.
How'd you hook that up?
Well, we had to go look for a van. And so we chipped in our money and bought a van in,
no, I mean, how did you hook up A&R guys that were willing to see you?
That was connections that Max and Tony had from, just from having done it once.
Right.
Like they'd done it once, they were going to do it again, So we got a van and we got in the van and we drove across the country and we all hated each other. And we got to LA, and then we played these showcases. We played the Roxy, and we played the Whiskey, and we played the Coconut Teaser. And I think 3 out of 5 of these shows were all like on double bills with Weezer.
Oh, that's weird.
Were like, yeah, well, they they were newly signed, and they were just they were just playing warm-up gigs around LA. So they had the whole look, and they had the sweater song, but I don't know if it was on the radio yet.
What instruments did you said Max and Tony? What did they play? You're a guitar, obviously. What did those guys play? Max
was the singer, and Tony played drums.
Is there no bass player, or
No, we had Kenny on bass, and we had a rotating keyboard player chair. But then by the time we went to LA, we did it without a keyboard player.
You said Kenny on bass. You're talking about not Kenny Aronson.
No, Kenny Dell.
Oh.
And and we all had made up names at that point. So all the guys had made up names, and I only had the forethought to think, well, I don't want to. I wanted to join the band, but I also just had a notion of it being a professional endeavor to join a band that already existed. So I said, well, why don't we use my middle name instead of my first name? And all their names were part of the reason I got the gig was the original keyboard player was going by the name Franz Liebkens. And I was like from the producers, because it wasn't a Broadway musical yet, right? It was just like, it was one of those movies your mom and dad showed you, here's, this Mel Brooks movie. It's hilarious,
Right.
And I was just like, I think it's hilarious because my folks told me it is. But now I realize that it's truly hilarious. But I was like, Franz Liebkens, so like, and they all had made up names. So I said, all right, well, we can call me, Angus Clark, but if you want, you can put Podgorny in the middle there if you want. And they're like, you mean the first Scotsman to win Wimbledon? He beat a blancmange?
How did they know this?
Because it's a Monty Python sketch.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not a Monty Python guy.
So I guess the joke there is that it's a science fiction sketch where these huge oatmeals, blancmange is like an oatmeal in the UK, and these oatmeals come down from outer space. They turn everybody into blancmanges, and then it winds up with a Scotsman playing a blancmange to win Wimbledon and wind up being the first Scotsman. And I guess the joke that's baked into that I had no idea about is that Scotsmen are notoriously the worst tennis players in the world, but I don't want to offend anybody, so I don't know if that's true, but I think it's the subtext of that Monty Python sketch.
So Angus is your middle name.
Yeah.
Why would they want any other name? That is like the coolest name for a rock star, though. I mean, seriously, this is way before, forget, Angus Young, but I mean, like I didn't even know you, and I wanted to interview you just because your name was Angus.
Well, I appreciate it.
Yeah, I didn't even care, like, if you had no personality almost. I just wanted to say Angus like 30 or 40 times, get it out of my system, move on. It was a new experience for me. It's just a cool name to say.
So
you guys went out to LA hating each other.
Yeah, and so we play this one gig at the Whiskey. And somewhere in the middle of that show, somebody just yells out, Gilmore!
Like something completely non-relevant to anything going on.
Yeah, but I wear it so on my sleeve. It's been so on my. I'm playing a Strat, and like we do these big, ballad tempo, spacey things, and so it's always been very obvious to anybody that watches me play. It's just like, that guy listens to a lot of David Gilmour. So we played that show, and then 2 days later I go to another nightclub to see a friend of mine who worked at Tower Records, because I had a job at Tower Records
on East 4th and Broadway.
Yeah.
Hold on, do you have any cool stories about that? Because I lived at that store.
So I worked in what's called the Count Out Room, which if you saw, what's the movie, the De Niro movie,
Taxi Driver?
No, it's the De Niro movie where about getting set up in Vegas.
Casino.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. There's a thing where he shows, this is the count out room, and he shows the count out room in the casino. So Tower Records has a count out room, and it has a drop safe, and like all the money is dropped in there. And then this team of like 4 or 5 people, depending on how busy they are, goes in there at like 9:30 in the morning and has to count all the cash checks and receipts from the night before, and you had to like bundle it up and put it through a money counter and then create a bank deposit, and then the armored car shows up and you give them the bank deposit.
Oh, wow.
So there were like two things that were going on there that were pretty funny. One was that there was always an IOU in the safe
from the staff,
from the store manager.
That's so
and
funny.
it's like, oh, don't worry about that. And don't worry about that. Yeah, don't worry about that. And it turned out, that guy was like completely stealing from the store and got busted. And also, given that period of time and where we were, there were at least a couple people over the time I was there. I think it was just one maybe in particular, who were dealing with dependency issues and would start trying to rip off the money during the count out. And watching that go down was tragic. And, and then, we had to check each other's money, and I would just be like, we'd take the bundles and you put them through the money counter. And like, if you weren't watching, it'd be like a 10 slip by in the 20s or something like that, and like, you just be like, hey, just, can you do this again? Because
hey, you're short $50.
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah. So
I love that store, man. I bought so many records there, and I discovered so much music. I mean, all those stores down there, like Bleecker Bob's, St. Mark's Record. Yeah. I mean, it was just such a time it was so prolific. The music scene in the city, back then in the
record stores were
70s
great.
70s and 80s were just tremendous, man.
I remember, I can tell you a great record. It's not my own story, but it's another story. It's the other guitar player I tour with in Trans-Siberian Orchestra is Al Petrelli, and he used to go to the record store. I can't remember what it was called. It was on 8th Street, and it was before Tower Records. It was called like the Record Shop or Record something. It was like on the north side of the street. They had like used records and new records and everything. And
on 8th Street, a little further, it was
further west. Between Broadway and
it was. Yeah, I know exactly. And it was kind of an upscale store. It wasn't a really old store. It wasn't like from the 70s.
Before Tower, it was the store.
Yeah, I know the store you're talking about. I don't know the name of it.
So Al told me that he used to go in there because he was a huge fan of studio players. He would go in there and just read the back of the records and see who played on what. And he was just following everything. And he went, and the new Michael Bolton record had come out, like Fool's Game, I guess, was probably it. And he looked at the back of it, and he read everybody that played on the record. He said, that guy's now in this band, that guy's in this other band, these two guys are touring with blah, blah, blah. He goes, this guy needs a band. And so he got together with like another guitar player who had some more connections than he did and a rhythm section, and they learned the entire record. And then they approached Michael Bolton's management and said, like, we have Michael's band ready to go. And they got the gig.
Holy crap. That's ambitious, man. Fuck, A+ for effort, man. That is...
But that was record stores. I don't know. It's like, I mean, now you can kind of ferret out information pretty quick, even quicker than that.
Because the internet. Yeah.
But I just thought that was a cute.
That's really cool. Very cool.
Interesting story about record stores. But so when Naked Sun, we get to LA, we play a showcase. Then 2 days later, after the Gilmore experience at the Whiskey, I'm with my girlfriend at a bar seeing another friend of ours playing a gig at Raji's, this was right after the Northridge earthquake. So there were all these buildings that were ready to be torn down. They were red flagged. And we're in there watching the show, and I go to the bar to get us drinks, and a woman at the bar says something to me, and I say something back, and then she says, "Oh, you must not be from here." And I said, "No, I'm here with my band." "Oh, did you just play the Whiskey 2 nights ago?" And I was like, "Yeah." "Oh, you had this real David Gilmour vibe." And I was like, "It's that obvious." And then she says, I work for an artist named Kitaro. Do you know who he is? And I was like, of course, Kitaro. I'm not sure that I really knew.
You didn't have a clue. Yeah.
And
that's the greatest thing. I've talked to like honestly probably 40 guys or 40 guys and gals, and it's the same version. Do you know who this guy? Absolutely. I have all his records. They're like, well, if you can get this done, then like shit, I had to go out and get the record. Or the other version is, hey man, do you do dobro? Absolutely. And then I go find a dobro, just learn how to play that part. Like, it's so cool, you got to hustle. It's called hustle, man.
Exactly. So Penny and I talk, and so she says, yeah, I work for his management, and he just put it to us that he wants somebody who plays like David Gilmour. And I said, well, I can do that. And so they sent me some tapes to my girlfriend's house, and she had her parents' place was in Palos Verdes. So it was all West Coast at this point. We were just still in LA. And I started trying to learn this stuff. And so the band are playing shows. We actually go to Seattle. This is like the week after Kurt Cobain died. Like, we're in Seattle and like stuff. And I'm sneaking away from the band to payphones and calling the management off and say, look, I can get you a demo, but it's going to take me a week. And I had to call up friends, some of my SC friends who were from LA and lived in LA, and tried to do a demo there at his place. It didn't really work out. And then, like, I don't know, a couple of weeks later, I was back in New York, and then there I was working on and I still didn't have all my gear because some of it was in transit. So I had to go to another friend's house in New York who had a better setup, and I recorded myself playing over some finished tracks. Cause the new age stuff is very like, sometimes there's no lead instrument. So you could like take a solo over like any part of it,
Yeah, it's like a backing track essentially.
So certain parts of it are, yeah. So we got through that, and I've submitted it, and then they and I think I was pretty near broke at that point. I was looking at, I think I didn't have and so when I joined Naked Sun, that's when I left Liquid Hips, and that's when I said, Jeff, you guys should call Jeff. And then that's when,
okay.
See, and he was a much better fit for that band than I was. And I think they made some great recordings. And then there I am, I'm kind of thinking, oh, I was back. Why did I bring that up? Because I was back, and I was like, and Jeff's about to leave for Europe with Liquid Hips. And I was like, here I am with no money in the bank and no gig.
And you're giving a gig away.
A band, and I was like, oh man. And then and I was looking at my first restaurant job or something like that. And then they call me up, and Kitaro's manager calls me up, and he just asked me, like, can you play like David Gilmour? And yeah. And do you have a Fender Stratocaster? I was like, yeah. So, okay, we're going to fly you to Colorado, and you're going to play on this record. So they fly me to Kitaro's joint in Colorado. He's got a Neve in his house.
A what?
A Neve board. Like, he's got a full blown recording studio,
in
like
his house.
48 channel mix desk, the whole thing on a lake outside Boulder, Colorado. And they let me, and I just took these solos over this like 64 piece orchestra they had recorded, and it was full blown Pink Floyd style stuff. And then while I was up there, they offered me the tour, and then that was it. And I think I was on tour for about 6 months of that year in '94, and they filmed the PBS special and everything, and it was great. And we, the first thing we did was 6 weeks in Japan, and I had never really been outside the United States before.
That's cool.
So it was really intense and amazing, and just a weird curvy road to wind up with a professional touring gig.
So when you're on that gig, first of all, let me just back up one thing. First time I ever saw you online, guess what I saw you doing?
teaching how to play like David Gilmour.
Yes. I'm like, you have your Strat and you're going over, and I think you had, for this particular thing, I think I remember you said, hey, I've got the Gilmour. I guess you got the EMG pickups or something like that.
No, those are David Allen. David Allen is a pickup maker in the U.S.
Okay,
and he's amazing. And he has this set called the Echoes set.
Okay,
that it's really awesome. That's what I have in that Strat. But I actually just stumbled across the box the other day. The artist rep at EMG came to see Kitaro, or maybe he came to see TSO. I'm not sure. Anyway, he gave me that set. He gave me that Gilmour
pickups.
set. Yeah, I had them in an American Standard for a while, and it's impressive what you can do with those. I just kind of prefer passive pickups to active, I think, as a general rule.
Because you have to put batteries in them, don't you?
Yeah, if the guitar is routed and you have a battery, cavity on it, like it's easy enough, but then you have a battery cavity on it. Yeah, but
who the hell wants that?
And that's odd too. So
no, I'm with you on that. I like simple. I'm not a bright guy with that. I like simple, man. So the question I want to ask you is, so you just said I was pretty near broke at that point, and then 6 months later, you're in Japan. Did you how old were you at that time?
That's 94, and I was born in 67. So
37 or 27?
27.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you might have been too young, like stop at any point and say, holy shit, look at this change, or thank God, or it's, or like, oh my God, this is nutty.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the night they offered me the tour, I think I was like at 8,000 feet in Colorado, probably not drinking enough water. So I'm like, I'm lying there with like that headache you get from being at altitude. And I could not fall asleep at all. I was lying there just like, I'm going to get paid to play the guitar and I'm going to go on tour. And it was really amazing. The one other thing about that experience that is hilarious to me, and I'm just remembering this now, is that I'm up in, when we go to start the tour, I fly out because the guitar is so central to the thing. Kotaro wants me out there like a week before the rest of the band. And I'm up there staying on the property, like in this cabin. He's got like 3 houses on the property, and I'm staying on the property. There's no TV. It's me and Nawang, the Tibetan monk, are staying up there. And
wait a minute, is this is this like a guy part of the band, or?
Yeah, he played didgeridoo and incidental percussion, and flute. And so me and Nawang are up there hanging out. No TV. There's no, internet, no smartphones, right? I don't even know if I have permission to make calls on the phone. Like, so there's this at the top of the road. There's
and weed wasn't legalized there yet. Complicating things anymore.
Wouldn't have mattered to me. But at the top of the road, there's a restaurant called the Millside Inn. They made fresh pie. It was awesome. It's probably still there. And I go there and I make this call, and I call Tony, the drummer from Naked Sun, because he's like really. I had broken the band up at that point. I was like, guys, that was fun. Sorry. And
I gotta make money. Bye.
Yeah, I this is it. And they were all relieved. And Tony, wished me well. And so I call him on the phone using a calling card on a payphone. And he's like, it's crazy here in LA, man, since the whole OJ thing. And I'm like, what OJ thing?
Because you didn't, what?
Literally, when I left, I think the day I left was the day that Nicole's body had been found.
Oh, okay.
And then I'm up there for
you've been sequestered.
2 weeks. no knowledge of it. So my buddy gets to recount for me the entirety of the slow speed chase.
Right.
So
that was in June.
Yeah,
right in June, like June 14th or something like that.
Yeah. It's amazing. I just think like how many people like actually, were just completely oblivious to that going on, and then he had the honor of telling me that there was that was one great phone call, and another great phone call was he was working at some legendary LA rehearsal studio the day of the first Kiss reunion rehearsal.
All these big iconic things you're missing in pop culture.
Just brushes with greatness. I have brushes.
That's wild. So, you played and recorded on a lot of records with Kotaro. What were your biggest takeaways from that experience? Because it was unlike anything else you'd done at that point.
Because I looked at the questions before, and one thing that I dealt with through that was having some sense of knowing my worth to the artist. I did not have a full appreciation of my value to the artist, and I could have negotiated for more money during the tours and whatnot. So
that's one of those things, man, that you're young and you don't know how to do that. Is it appropriate to do that or that? Yeah, I totally get that.
But the thinking that I've come around to is that, and this is something I've lived by for a while now, is that ordinarily the only bargaining power you have as a sideman is your willingness to walk away. That's really it.
100%.
Because what else are you going to offer the guy that has the record deal and the budget to the tour and all those kinds of things? It's just like, hey, this gig works for me. I'm getting out of it what I want to get out of it.
Or not.
Yeah. And that's it. It's just the willingness to. So it's like, hey, if it's worth it to you to have me do this, I need X amount. Otherwise, thanks very much. And
but I'll be honest with you. I'm coming out of the business world. It's the same thing.
Yeah,
that's all you can do. I mean, if somebody wants to do something with you or engage you for something, it's like it's either worth it to you or it's not. Or any transaction, I've negotiated in loads of different industries that I've, either worked in or had side hustles in or had, involvement in. And it's, being able to walk away and having 100% emotional detachment is the best lever really that you can have.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that there was probably, that's one thing that I see as a missed opportunity. But at the end of the day, the band, what happened financially with that was that at the time I got hired, he was already downsizing. So at the time I got hired, he had gone to a less expensive band, but he had maintained an expensive crew. It created a really weird dynamic for me, it being my first tour, to deal with being seen as, maybe not even deserving the job that I had by the guys that are supposed to be working for me. And, it's all a team effort, like with band and crew, particularly like with the TSO. I mean, we all know the crew works harder than us. Like, sure. And they're veteran guys and they deserve endless amounts of respect and whatnot. I was just happy to be there on the Kitaro tour and just, it was crazy for me. But at the same time, there was a lot of like, I don't know what to call it, negative energy. It built into this dynamic between probably a lot of those crew guys were working below the rate that they wanted to be working at that point on the Kotaro thing. And then, so there's a lot of tension in that. And then, so like when I got hired, I thought the band were going to be all older and better than me. And they turned out to be about my age and pretty much on the same level. I was better than some of them, that kind of thing. And so moving forward through that, then the band got smaller. So the percussionist wound up playing on the kit, and it went from 2 keyboard players to 1, or we started swapping out an entirely American band for a couple of players from Japan. I don't know if they were working for less, but it was, there's definitely some financial element to it. And then eventually I did my last tour with them, which was just, a smaller combo, no violin player. So I had to pick up all of the violin parts on guitar.
That's a lot of work.
And then he went back to a full-size band with all Japanese players. And like he had the guitar player that he hired, like learn some of my solos note for note and all that kind of stuff. And that, that was strictly financial.
Yeah.
They were able to get those guys for a little less money. And then the drummer didn't work out, and they hired Don Perry from Jethro Tull to come in and play drums. And I was like, I wanted to tour with Don Perry from Jethro Tull.
That's wild.
So I don't know where I was going with this, other than the takeaways in hindsight. Yeah, I could have asked for more, but maybe I wouldn't have gotten it. And so I think it all wound up fine, because
sure.
at the point it went away, it was fine with me, because I'd definitely done it. I'd done it and done it and done it,
Man, I had Martin Barr on the show from Tull recently.
I was listening to the Martin Barr one, man.
He's he's just like, the guy's enthusiasm and a passion and like eagerness to get in the studio is just like it was when he was probably 17 when he first started with Tull. That was the thing that was so impressive about him.
Well, it's fun.
He was just like, and he's like a working class stiff, he's not the slightest ego at all.
Yeah. The Tull thing came back around for me, because I the violin player in the Trans-Siberian Orchestra for a number of years is a woman named Anna Phoebe. And she and I co-wrote, and I did a bunch of the demos and arrangements for her first solo album. And so she flew me to London to help her make the record, and we had a great time doing it. And then soon after that, Ian Anderson was touring. Either Ian Anderson plays the music of Jethro Tull or plays symphonic versions of the music of Jethro Tull. He was touring something like that, and he would always have a feature violin player. So he had Anne-Marie Calhoun, who I think has done like the Steve Vai gig, and I think he had Lucia Miccarelli, who was in the TSO as well, and then he hired Anna. And so he would always feature the violin player by playing 2 or 3 of their songs. So he did 2 of the songs that I wrote with him.
You co-wrote? That's really cool.
He actually mentioned my name from the stage. I said, this is a song that she wrote with Angus Clark.
That's pretty cool, man. That must have been a little big thrill for you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Huge. It's totally huge.
How did you get hooked up with TSO? Are you're still with TSO today, right?
Yes.
Okay.
We're looking forward to the next tour.
How did you get hooked up with them?
So Marty Friedman from Megadeth was always a huge Kitaro fan, huge fan of Japanese music and culture. He lives in Japan, or at least he was living in Japan for probably the better part of the last 20 years. And so I had met him twice. So I met him once at the National Guitar Workshop. He came and he did a clinic, and then the whole faculty would play the visiting clinician, and he and I had played Little Wing together, which seems like an odd choice to do with.
Yeah, it is.
But he was very complimentary at the end of that. He just kind of said just some things that I was just kind of blown away. And so then the next time I saw him was when he came to see Kitaro at the Universal Amphitheater, and he was backstage, which is really odd. The backstage party at Universal Amphitheater, I don't know if it's still like this. I don't know if it's still there. No, Hollywood Bowl is what got torn down. I don't know. Something got torn down recently. Anyway, the backstage party at Universal Amphitheater is promoted by somebody wholly uninvolved with the show. So there's all these people showing up that weren't even at the show.
So it's like a club party promoter.
Well, I don't know. It's just the weirdest vibe. It's like hooking people up with some free booze, and then a bunch of like LA, numbskulls show up. No offense. And so it's just a really weird vibe. But then there's Marty. And I think this was the second year I had done it. So I was walking around all these people who had absolutely no interest in who I was or who Kotaro was. And I was glad handing them and kind of going, hey, how's it going? Did you get a beer? Have a beer. No. Yeah. It's like, just because like, you don't know who I am. I was just standing on stage for 2 hours. No, come on here. Yeah. Get a drink. It's our party. Come on. You're welcome. Everybody's welcome. You're all welcome. So the second year, so then there's Marty, and I was just like, oh my God. And he again, he was so complimentary, and he is one of the nicest guys, that I've ever met. And I said, you may not remember this. We actually met before. You came and taught a clinic at the National Guitar Workshop. Yeah, man. Yeah. And we played Little Wing. And I said, yes.
That's cool.
So it was really amazing to me. So, in 2001, so TSO history, for those of you who don't know, 99 was their first tour. 2000, they did their first tour as both an East Coast and West Coast bands. And then, and the West Coast guitar players were, George Cintron and Damon Lescott.
Wait a minute. George Cintron?
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that. He had a band when I was a kid called Cintron. They were badass, man.
Yeah.
Wow, that's wild. That is really, sorry, man. That's just like a rattling. That's like really deep in the cobwebs, man. Holy Let me tell you why. Do you remember listening to Metal Shop, WBAB, Fingers Metal Shop? Yeah. That's where I used to hear Cintron. I got turned on to so much cool music from that guy, man. That was amazing. Wow. Then, you said yes. I'm sorry. I really apologize. You were in mid flow there. I was just like, wow. You were talking about the West Coast guitar players of George Cintron.
Yeah. So in 99, they toured one band, and the guitar players were Al Petrelli and Chris Caffrey. And then in 2000, they toured two bands, and the East Coast guitar players were Alex Skolnick and Chris Caffrey, and the West Coast guitar players were Damon Lescott and George Cintron, because Al had replaced Marty Friedman in Megadeth.
Okay.
So Al was in Megadeth during the 99 tour. And then as coming into 2000, in the 2000 tour. Sorry. So 99, it was Al and Chris. 2000, Al is in Megadeth. So somewhere in the middle of 2001, they start looking to put a new West Coast band together for a number of reasons. And they call Marty because he's not doing the Megadeth gig anymore, and he probably has a skill set similar to Petrelli's. And at that time Marty was living in Japan and unavailable, but he gave them my number, which was like a voicemail number with a 212 area code, because that was very important back then.
You know how many people have done that with the 212 area code?
Yeah. And so the manager called me up, and I was just kind of amazed, because I think the summer before or the winter before, they played the Beacon And I walked by and I was like, what is this line for? They're like, Trans-Siberian Orchestra. I was like, oh, cool. And then I saw the TV special and I was looking at it. I was looking at guys in black pants and white shirts and playing symphonic hard rock. And I said, this is the kind of gig I would wind up on.
And sure enough,
I just remember thinking, like, I'm probably going to wind up doing this. And I remember recognizing Petrelli because I was like, that's Petrelli. Because he's just been everywhere. You know, he's on Asia Records. I remember buying the Asia Records that he played on. Yeah, I was a huge fan of his. He's an amazing player. So
I interviewed Alex. He's an amazing player, man. Holy crap. Yeah. Super talented guy.
So they call me up and I go down. It was really interesting because it was still that period where, you know, there's this like backwards relationship in gear endorsements. Like there was this notion that because like, you know, a certain guitar company is a well-known brand, that they get to put their stamp on players as being valuable. Like, you know, we're Jackson Guitars and we endorse this unknown player. And so, like, I guess the TSO had reached out to, they always had a great relationship with Jackson Fender. And no offense to Jackson Guitars, I just have to say them right then. Because I love Jackson Guitars. I have an Adrian Smith model that I love. But they actually reached out to the guitar company to refer them guitar players, you know? And I mean, like, you never seen a worse bunch of like practice room jockeys come up to show up for a stage performance gig, right? It's like, because these are guys, you know, all made shred tapes while staring at their shoes or sitting, and no offense to that. I mean, that's like, that's where it all starts, man. Like, that is valuable time spent. But, you know, like if like me, it's like Hendrix was where it started, a lot of where the stage performance notion of what I do started, because it is a physical endeavor. Like, you are going to get out there and you are going to entertain the crap out of people. Like, that is a thing to do that it is beyond, you know, just that time, that time spent on all those fundamentals, you know. And we started this interview, we're talking about that's what I wanted for my teacher, but the rock is in that performance zone, you know. And
you had done that in front of 75,000 people, so you had that.
It's just always I'll do the same show in front of 10,000 people that I do in front of 15,000 people, but under 10,000, I'm phoning it in.
But
It's all about the pause. No, I mean, geez, bar gigs, man. This is one of those, like, if I'm going to give advice, every gig is your opportunity to present your best stuff, to be seen by someone who's an entree to another, you know, either another gig or another chapter in your life.
You know what? Especially in the music business, because it's a small community and people really are pretty freaking supportive when it comes down to it, you know, like much more so than any other industry I've ever been involved with, for sure.
Right. Yeah. And so I'm just always out there trying to perform. So when it came down to the time to audition, I prepared for that gig like the way I did for the Naked Sun thing. I mean, just like it was not easy, because I was probably off the Kotaro gig, and the Kotaro gig was not chops heavy like that was. And so I was probably off the Kotaro gig for 2 years. I was doing songwriting workshops, working on singing, you know, just kind of back into like, let me start a band again. And I was working a day job. And I would literally bring my guitar to work at that job and like lock myself in and, you know, with the metronome over lunch and just like go back to shedding scales and stuff like that. Cause there's a couple of, as another friend of mine expressed it to me, it's like, it's a hard gig because you're playing just power chords. And then all of a sudden you're playing hyper speed, you know. It's not like getting warmed up into your zone and then here's my best licks. It's like I'm just chunking away, you know, no spotlight. Da, 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 and then bam, spotlight. Okay, wow, what the? Yeah, okay, done. You know, it's like that. And you know, Rock of Ages on a Broadway gig was similar to that too. I mean, you're in the dark more than half the show, but then suddenly, you know.
Well, that's like, chops, man. You got to be totally, you know, you got to be really on top of your shit.
Yeah. So I really had to shed to get that together to do it. And I went down, did the audition, and I did one audition for the co-producer, a guy named Bob, and they videotaped me. And then I did a callback, and that was for Paul O'Neill, who was the writer producer of the Trans-Siberian Orchestra, who passed away middle of last year, or early last year. So the second audition was just all about how I could play this acoustic ballad that's like a centerpiece of the show. And I brought in my vintage Jethro Tull 016. And why I have an 016? You know, it's like a really small one. I brought it in, and I'm playing it like kind of like just like what's on the record. And then Paul goes, no. It just like reaches in and grabs this guitar out of my hands. I was like, okay. And he plays it for me, and he just plays it for me. And the thing is, this is another takeaway, is just working with a producer or an artist. They may not have your chops or schooling or any of that, but you cannot, that's your baggage. They're my baggage, that I went through all that in order to feel valid about doing what I was doing. That's not his thing. He's in that position to try, you know, the best that he can to express something in his creative mind that he wants me to help him execute. And you just have to go to being a blank, you know, I am a blank slate. I'm a sponge. What's he trying to show me in this moment? And I just kind of let myself go, and he gave me the guitar back, and I gave it back to him. And I can't even remember what I did differently, if it was that the picking pattern was slightly different, or the emphasis, the articulation was slightly different, and that the tempo was a little bit slower. I don't know. But then he was like, okay, yeah. You know, and it was all about my ability to take direction.
Yeah. Well, you just said something I think is very important in general. You know, I have this saying, you know, don't make your problems someone else's problems. And I think that's basically what you were saying. You know, the way you did things and your interpretation is mutually exclusive. You know, someone else is driving the bus at that point. You know, that's it. You're a sideman, and you're in the service business. So you're providing the service, you know. It's not like, hey, no, that's not the right way to play.
Right.
You know, that's not going to get you the gig. You're in the service business. You know, you play it the way the person paying you wants you to play it. I mean, it's like any other job. You know, you can't go into it.
And you have to be an interpreter, because their ability to, you know, I mean, Kotaro dealt with the same thing. Like, he's not a schooled musician, so whenever he wanted to show you something, he'd have to sing it or play it. And so I definitely had honed that skill through my time with Kitaro. So it paid off in that audition.
You seem like you're not the kind of person either that, you seem like you put your education in a pretty appropriate place as far as like in your life. It's meaning like you got something out of it. I know you said before that, you know, to some extent you went to school to help define you. But that being said, I haven't heard anything that you said you took that in its proper place for you, that it was kind of like we just said, that was your thing. You know, that was your little thing, not like, well, I have a degree from here and I did, you know, that's like completely irrelevant, you know. And I think, which is appropriate in everything, if you're going to do business with someone, they don't want to hear about that shit. They don't care. Yeah.
It would be a very, there are only, and I can't call one to mind, but it would have to be a unique set of stressors imposed where I would have to dangle my educational credentials out in front of everybody. Don't tell me I have a master's degree in music.
Yeah. And it's like that's irrelevant to everybody but you. You sound like you've been really like cognizant of that.
Yeah.
That your journey is your journey, you know.
Yeah, it's so individual. That's a huge part of what we learn as we mature, right? But to finish the TSO story, the thing that they were not telling us at the time I did the audition was that Petrelli was coming back. So while I auditioned playing all of the stage left guitar stuff, like the lead part on Mozart 1224, the intro to Flight of the Bumblebee, like all these things, it was like, okay, the tour rehearsal is going to start. You stand over there and learn all of these parts. And then it was interesting. They hired me. They said, because I did the audition on my Strat, because I'm thinking this is neoclassical rock, Yngwie Malmsteen. They're going to love me on a Strat. No, it's a Les Paul gig. It's totally a Les Paul gig. Or at least a Gibson gig. And so I didn't have enough experience. Somehow I just missed the boat on what the level of prejudice, I don't know if that's a good word, regarding that Les Paul players and producers have towards the animus or something they have towards Strats. Like, I had no idea. So I did the audition and I was asked, "That's great. Will you play a Jackson?" And I said, "But which answer will get me the gig?"
Yeah,
my answer to that. But then they never said, "Yeah, here's your Jacksons to pick from." Or they had a couple show up and they were like 24 fret guitars, and I was like, it's like, and there were promises like, "Oh, we'll get you whatever you want." And I said, "Okay, well, I need like a 22 fret guitar that does what you want it to do, that I can play." And that was never forthcoming. So I just went on tour with a Strat. And it was like 3 years later when it was finally like, "Angus, please stop bringing your Strat on tour."
Well, that is really weird.
Why would it take you that long to tell me that, man? I'll play whatever you want.
That makes no sense.
And I played the only 22 fret production guitar that Jackson had at the time was the Randy Rhoads, and I loved it. I was like, "Done, man. Get me Randy Rhoads for days." Yeah, because I loved Randy Rhoads. Sure. So that was an interesting thing, because all I wanted to do was be cooperative. I was never trying to be difficult.
That's really weird. That's almost like being in a relationship for 3 years, and then your partner, your wife, whatever, finally says, "Hey, can you put the potatoes on the bottom shelf?" or something silly like that. It's like, yeah, what have we been waiting for? Yeah, that's kind of weird, man.
And I think that, but it's my own fault. I think if I was, if I had carried through on the promise that I made in that audition, where I, was a blank slate. It's like, what does he want me to know? He wants me to know that, how to play this song. I should have just been like, I'm going to take that thing about wanting me to play a certain type of guitar to heart. But at the end of the day, man, there was a level of misdirection in the whole thing, because the guitars are all made with a Les Paul. They're all made with a Les Paul and a Telly, actually. So now, I just play Gibson V's and occasionally an SG and a Telly, and Al still plays the Les Paul and stuff like that. And it sounds huge, man. I mean, that's what those records sound like, and that's all anybody wanted to do was make Paul happy. So I'm glad we've come out where we are, but it's a process.
So you tour with TSO every year. Do they make records?
Yeah, but I don't know what the future holds right now regarding the next record since Paul's passing. So, but it's just an honor and a privilege to have the time working with him.
That's awesome. And then you got involved with SongDivision. Talk about that, because I know that's a big part of your life right now and has been for a little while. And I know you're super enthusiastic about that.
Yeah. That's kind of a culmination of, a lot of the stuff we're talking about here, everything in my personal journey. There's periods where I had a day job. Like I had a day job when I got that audition for the TSO, and I was doing database development and design for L'Oreal. And so some of that education coming in handy. And I just got this call to do this songwriting as a team building activity for I think a banking company or something like that. And we did it in Mover's studio in the city. And I just really enjoyed it. It was like an episode of The Office. like everybody kind of revealed themselves as a type. There's the guy who wants to be in charge, and there's all these different roles, and then getting everybody to work together on something that has a finite timeline, like you will accomplish this task by the end of the day, was really empowering for them. And for me, it was very similar to teaching a student their first lesson and not having to chase them up the next week and find out if they practiced or not. You got to show them.
God, that's got to be a good feeling.
Got to show them some of the fun and joy of making music, and for some people it's very freeing in a way that I couldn't even have anticipated. Like, because some people are very nervous about anything that they consider to be a creative or musical activity, that it is going to be embarrassing in some way, or that they are excluded. They're just by nature excluded from it in some way. So it does challenge people in a way that outside the box team building activities should for corporate. But it also is really just a communication and consensus building exercise. And we found it to have great results for people at very high level leadership positions, but also company wide. Like we do them for, something. We helped Procter & Gamble launching a new manufacturing and distribution site. And this is like a huge project that's going to reinvigorate the economy in an area of West Virginia, which is, kind of been very hard hit for a long time now. And so it was all these folks that have been training on a production line. They've been, they have a mock production line they've been training on. So it was like company wide. It was like the whole vertical, or pyramid of everybody that was going to work there, and just kind of how they are meant to. They're all relying on each other to move things forward. And we helped them write their own song about what how they participate in it. And what we do is we use real fundamental songwriting principles. Like if you write lyrics that are personal and honest, they will be more universal, rather than thinking that if you write to the personal, that it makes it too specific for other people to listen to. Like if you listen to some of the most universally appealing songs and lyrics in the world, the fact that they're written in the specific sense are to their benefit in terms of getting, like I was just listening to American Girl this morning on the radio.
Tom Petty.
Yeah. And there's that line, she stood out on the balcony of the traffic rolled by on 441 like waves crashing on the beach. That's 441. I assume it's a Florida highway.
441 runs up and down the East Coast. Yeah. It runs up and down the East Coast of Florida. It's kind of like a main artery that runs up and down the East Coast. Yeah. And on this coast, we have 41, funny enough. On the west coast of Florida. Yeah.
So right there, it's like the genius of the specificity, but everybody can relate to the poetry. Yeah.
Well, I think,
and so we just use that to help people, to build that kind of empathy, or, just that notion that my problems aren't so unique that, or they're not problems, but my experience of working in this company and with these people is unique, but not so unique that sharing it puts me at some great, I'm not exposing myself in some terrible way. It's just a little bit of trust that you build in a collaborative environment. So I just love doing SongDivision. I found that I was pretty good at getting, lyrics written by non-musicians to scan over music fairly quickly. It's kind of like, let's see, if I start this one before the downbeat, I can get through it. And, and it was all about working quickly and making sure these folks have a good time, share the joy of music. And we've seen a lot of benefit. We have, great clients. Most of the companies that hire us are, great places to work. Like that kind of thing. These are employers that really care about their employees and want to make sure that they're working together and having a good time while they're doing it. So in my role as SongDivision, I'm the managing partner for the U.S. So I do a lot of production and design. I design the programs, but then I also deliver as a lead facilitator, MC, game show host, even in some cases. Yeah. And as a keynote speaker. So it's a little more specific than motivational speak, because I think guys like Tony Robbins are amazing. Ours is a little bit more, there's little communication exercises and there's that collaborative task of writing the song that are meant to serve our clients' needs a little more directly in terms of getting their people to work together the best way possible.
So and if you're not comfortable answering this, that's totally cool. You own, or you're a partner in the SongDivision unit here in the States?
Yeah,
that works.
It's a global company, so there's a global entity, but SongDivision USA, I'm a partner in. Yeah.
Okay, great. That's really cool. Yeah, I think the other thing that's good about what you're doing is with SongDivision, I think most non-creative people are fairly repressed. They have a lot of stuff going on in their head they can't get out, or it's difficult for them. That's just kind of like been my experience. What's that Thoreau line? Most men lead lives of quiet consternation and die with the song still in them. It's true. I mean, most people are they're like uptight about shit, and creative people are different. I think they're a lot less repressed with everything. Like, I mean, just like, humor wise, sex wise, just communication wise. It seems like, in my experience in dealing with creatives and non-creatives and just talking with people, that's just a general observation, I guess, kind of. And I bet what you do, they're like so thrilled to unbutton without having judgment. And, it's like part of the game that you're playing with them. It's fun.
Well, there's two things about that are interesting. There's a million ways you could go from that springboard, but one is that, like, I try to make the point in the keynote that I give that we all experience opportunities for creative thought during the day, and that identifying those opportunities is a skill that you kind of, or a muscle that you want to develop. And more often than not, those opportunities for creative thought come in the face of obstacles. So the things that we see as problematic or deviations from our standard day or something like that are usually, this didn't go right.
Right.
That's your that obstacle is your opportunity for creative thought, right? That's like, I mean, there are we have clients for SongDivision whose whole, like, maybe the IT support desk for Microsoft, or, and it's like this entire business sector wouldn't exist without people needing to find, creative solutions to problems that come up along the way of getting things done. Now, we all rely on our computers like all the time, right? At the same time, sometimes I really take note of like, hey, I just used the computer for something and accomplished in 10 minutes what it used to take a day to do.
Absolutely.
Wow. Right?
Yeah.
Because we remember what it was like.
Absolutely.
And so I enjoy taking stock of that in order to make myself kind of, less stressed out about those times where things are not going so well and I have to figure out a workaround or something like that.
What you're going to find funny about that, by the way, about that one particular thing is you have a son, right?
Daughter.
I'm sorry. As your daughter grows up, she does not have that frame of reference. And what's difficult in her world is going to be like hilarious to you.
Right. Yeah. So we make that point that that's creative thought. Like figuring out the workaround, figuring out the solution. That is a creative opportunity. Like that's not, I know you could very easily say on the face of it, like that's not as much fun as playing the guitar. And, if I'm just getting to cut loose, play the guitar, I'll say, yeah, I get it. You can throw my metaphor in my face. That's fine. But at the same time, I'll say that like, if I'm trying to get a song to produce a song and make it work and get all the pieces to fit right. But I just know that the hook needs to include this sequence of words in some way, and it's hard to find something that rhymes with it. Like I am in my most creative space right there, trying to solve, find a solution for, a mixture of goals. Like I need the song to, accomplish this in this way. And I also need to fit this in. What am I going to do? Same thing. Like, my spreadsheet doesn't work and I needs to say this for my boss, but it needs to say this for my employee. How am I going to make everybody happy and still accomplish goals? But what we do is just a communication exercise where we make sure that people are listening to each other, because I think it's a big problem in the workplace. And
it's a big problem everywhere.
Yeah, it's a big problem everywhere.
Yeah,
and we look at that as I look at it as two things. There's the courage to speak up and the courtesy to listen. So you have to calm down and actually listen to people, and you have to be willing to say yes to things sometimes. So we do an example from the world of music is that, when Freddie Mercury comes in and presents Bohemian Rhapsody to the guys in Queen the first time, like if he was shouted down for coming up with a 6-minute epic that, with a operatic part in the middle and everything, if they had not said yes to him in that first meeting or something like that, or if he had not stood up for what he believed to be right, had the courage, wouldn't have gotten done. And then they had to get a yes from their record label to release it as a single. And that there's an actual quote in there's kind of a documentary about it. There's a quote from like a marketing manager for their label who said, really the only thing we did right was say yes more often than we said no. And that's why Bohemian Rhapsody got released as a single. And so all these things are just little ways that we try to help people explore what elements of their job are actually creative endeavors, and to see themselves as having a role in what they do that's important. In some ways it's creative, it's vital, and that they will benefit from, being an active participant in, their work and collaboration with their coworkers. So
that saying yes is critical to so many opportunities musically and any place in general. You know, there's very few. I mean, people talk about, well, you got to learn when to say no when you're overwhelmed. That's a separate issue. You know, yes, that you do have to learn to say no when you're overwhelmed because you can't do everything. But just saying yes to meeting new people or that's been such a great experience for me. It's specifically since I've been doing this show, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Just saying yes to things in general.
Yeah, great. I think I actually have some experience in the last few years where that having to confront a decision where no is the only appropriate course was challenging for me, and I had to kind of learn that the hard way, you know. But as I get to this point in my career, where you start to have to pick your battles and choose your priorities, and in all things, choosing the notion of choosing the thing to do is very often the hardest part. Is the things you have to say no to in order to pursue the one thing that you are going to get the most fulfillment and benefit from. Yeah. So it's because I still get offers for certain playing gigs that sound fun and sound challenging in new and different ways, even though I've been challenged in most ways throughout the course of my career. But without the right amount of time to kind of prepare, I can't prepare for anything the way I prepared for my first TSO audition anymore. You know, it's like, I'm doing this. Probably the thing I prepared hardest for in the last couple of years was I've been doing this Ultimate Queen celebration gig, and that was a huge amount of material to throw myself into. I was never a massive devotee. I don't think I ever paid money for a Queen album in my life. So I'm about as legit on it as Dave Kilmeister is on the Roger Waters gig, you know?
Hey,
although he's actually backing up Roger Waters, so I give it to him on that.
Talk about, you grew up in the Upper West Side. What was your childhood like?
Well, it was great. My parents were together. My dad was a lawyer for the government, and my mom was an opera singer. But primarily a stay-at-home mom, and raised my brother and I. And it was an apartment on the corner of 110th and Riverside. I just got told that I think Anton Fig lives in the building now. I don't know if that's true, but I'll have to figure it out. Yeah. So, and it was great. Went to
that's like 6 blocks from Columbia, right?
Yeah. So, and I went to a school called the Cathedral School, which is on 111th in Amsterdam, which is modeled on a British choir school. It's on the grounds of the Cathedral of St. John the Divine. So I was in the choir. So I had an early musical education, but my folks only had 3 rock albums. They had Beggar's Banquet, Revolver, and Sgt. Pepper's.
That's not a bad 3 to have. If you gotta only own 3, that you could do a lot worse, man.
Yeah. So I would listen to those, and then the Monkees TV show.
Oh, that was awesome.
I would only ever watch Star Trek and the Monkees, and then I think I got some Monkees albums, and I still kind of have a soft spot for that stuff. And then I feel like I just remember Purple Haze kind of igniting something in me, and then the song Paranoid. I feel like I remember the first time I ever heard it on the radio, and just that tell a joke and I will sigh and you will laugh and I will cry.
Great song.
Happiness is so around.
What were you listening to? What station?
It feels like the first time.
Would you listen to PLJ or NEW?
PLJ, of course. Yeah. Man, come on.
So funny.
Well, I was just talking about, because I've been playing for Joe Lynn Turner, who was in Rainbow, and he made the last 3 Rainbow albums of their initial, thing, from Ronnie James Dio, 3 records in the live album, and then Graham Bonnet made 1 record, and then Joe Lynn came in, and they had their first top 10 single, and PLJ wore that out.
Yeah,
it was Stone Cold, Jealous Lover, Street of Dreams, and so I just remember that. And so when I'm on stage playing with Joe, it's just a thrill to do that. But yeah, so that was so I was singing in the choir, and then I took some cello lessons, and that didn't work out. And then I got guitar lessons, and that. But really, I think when The Wall came out was when I said that I need to, let's get some proper guitar lessons going on, and let's do this thing. That was it. The Wall was just
great record.
Yeah, it was just done.
I think if I remember correctly, Joel's mom was an opera singer too.
I know that his parents were classical.
Yeah, I think his mom was an opera singer as well. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Your folks, so they were pretty supportive of you in music.
Yeah.
Do you have any brothers or sisters?
1 brother.
Is he involved in music at all?
He did play the violin, but not professionally.
Gotcha. Having been at this a while now and looking back, what advice would you have given yourself if you had the opportunity to do so, like that would have been welcomed or should have been welcomed, assuming you're willing to listen? Separate issue, of course.
Well, I think I mentioned this. Well, I think I don't know. I didn't have a great way of gauging my worth as a player versus other players, and where that put me in the running for things. I think everything that I went to audition for, I talked about these moments of auditioning and the way that I prepared for them and stuff. I was only ever running against myself. That was just like, I could see it so clear. Like, there's me doing this thing. And I think that probably, if I could have given myself the advice that you're doing pretty well in comparison to most guys your age and so on and so forth, you should go out and find more opportunities. I would have worked more. There was like having the Kotaro gig. It's like, I got my gig and let me work on my songwriting and this and that and the other thing. And, I wasn't hunting down a lot of other gigs all the time, kind of, putting myself in challenging situations all over the place. I was like, saw the Kotaro thing as, they like me. I know I can do this. I don't know if they've called anybody else. As far as I was concerned, their phone list had 0 other people on it. And I was aware there were other people, up for the TSO gig, but it didn't faze me one bit, because I just knew that I can do this. They think I'm, I gave them a video of me playing with Kitaro, with massive lights and strings and everything. And it's like,
yeah,
I can do this.
You could do this.
I can do this, right. So I think just be more confident maybe would have been the thing to tell myself.
Thanks, man. Yeah, confidence is it's a wicked tool that gets so much easier to obtain as you get older when you need it. When you don't, not that you don't need it, but the struggle is not as much as it might have been when you needed it more younger, sort of. Yeah. Yeah. Hey, let's talk about gear for a few minutes. Go-to guitars. I know you said you're playing right now a SG sometimes, Flying V. and once in a while a Tele. Are those your go-tos or?
I try to play the right guitar for the gig. So that's been my, ever since getting, kind of figuring out where I was being lazy in terms of what I was being asked for from the artists I was playing for. So I was just trying to do the right guitar for the gig. So if you saw me in that Gilmore video, it's my favorite Strat is this 62 reissue with the David Allen pickups. But I'll give you the really nerdy tip about my Strats.
There he goes. Yeah, I think that's the one you is that the one you played? Yeah.
Yeah, it's the one. So there's the David Allen pickups, and the thing about it is that the bridge pickup on the Echoes set by David Allen, mm-hmm. the bridge pickup has almost twice the output of a standard Strat.
Oh wow.
Bridge pickup. Because Gilmore's been using something really high output by Duncan in that position. But you can tap it down to the traditional output if you want to. I never use that. Basically, I never use, what do I never use? I never use positions 2 and 4.
Interesting. That's like the positions that people use when they play a Strat.
I'll tell you, I used to have like a early Marshall MIDI preamp, and stuff like that, preamp, power amp, and that was what I used on the Kotaro gig. And it sounded fine on the Kotaro gig. I was surrounded by a bunch of synths. And I came back to New York, and I had it in a small, carryable rack thing with a power amp. And I joined this band with a singer-songwriter, and he just had a Fender Hot Rod. And he would just plug into that thing, and I was destroyed. Didn't matter. I said, all right, forget this. And that's when I got my first and only 50-watt Plexi. And the other thing I found.
What year is that?
It's a reissue, but it's before they started. The new reissues have an effects loop, and I don't know where they're made. This is an older one. It doesn't have an effects loop. It has been lovingly restored. So
that's awesome.
It's in great shape. But so positions 2 and 4, when you're in all the playing contexts that I'm in, without a quality mix engineer, they disappear. They get masked way too easily by other instruments. Now, I love Mark Knopfler, and he's like a 2 and 4 guy, right?
Sure.
So, but I would love to play in a combo where I can get my sound dialed in to still be heard, doing that, in amongst whatever else is going on stage. So sorry. So this Strat is great. I grew up on a 22 fret guitar. So the other nerdy thing is that the bridge on this is an American Special bridge. It's not a traditional bridge, so you can retrofit an American Special bridge onto a high-end Strat because the screws line up with a vintage bridge, but the saddles are closer together. And so my picking is just, I had a Floyd Rose on my guitar for so long. So my picking, if I really want to go fast, the traditional spacing is just a little too wide for me. So I retrofit all my traditional Strats with this way lower end bridge. But Callahan makes a block for it, so I don't think I'm really losing anything in terms of the metals and stuff. And all right.
Do you prefer rosewood necks? Because I do.
No, not really. That one's rosewood. I have a maple, and then let's see. So, but I think but the rosewood guitar is a better guitar than the maple guitar, so I stay on the rosewood one.
Gotcha.
And the maple Strat has virtual pickups in it, which I'm never happy with the sound of.
What does that mean? Virtual pickups?
They're noiseless pickups. Because I did the Jolene tour the first year with the real single coils, the David Allen, and I just put a Boss noise suppressor on my pedal board, and it worked great, and it sounded great. So I don't know if I truly need the noiseless ones. I was just worried. I record a lot with that Tele. It's a deluxe series Telecaster, so it's not a Tele Deluxe, which has two humbuckers on it. It's a deluxe series, so it has like locking tuners, and I put a Seymour Duncan little 59 in the bridge.
What year is that?
It's recent.
Current? Yeah,
it's recent. That's the thing with Fender. It's like watching a car manufacturer. Like you kind of have to look every year and say, "Ooh, I could do with one of those," and then you just have to strike when the iron is hot, you know. Because they're a little different every year.
It's funny. I've only seen photos of you in like full rock star mode, and it's really hard to envision you playing a Tele.
Oh.
I always see you with like the V or just rock star mode, you know, and it's just
I man, you know, there's this section of the TSO show where I play the mountain, and it starts with all this thunder, and I did this whole Hendrix inspired whammy bar thing at the beginning of it, and it just kind of went away because they're just not interested in that much of that. It just didn't wind up being appropriate to the show, because I just love putting the guitar on the ground and banging on it and whammy bar and all this crazy noise and stuff, but it wasn't. I got to find another, you know, show to do that stuff on, because that wasn't right for that show. I had fun doing it, but I still love the V's. Once I landed on having the V, and they're not super special ones. Like one's like a 2012 or 13 V, and then the other one's an 2005 red one, and then I even have an Epiphone Brent Hines signature model Flying V, and I just put all of them have Seymour Duncan distortion pickups in them, because I don't know if this has changed, but at the time the V's were coming with the high output ceramic magnet pickups, 500T and 400, 490R.
490, yeah, right.
Yeah. And Gibson did not make them covered. And on a V, you run the risk of the string catching around the edge of the pickup. And so I just wanted them covered. Plus I just like the look. And so the Duncan distortion is really, if you look at the specs, it's virtually identical to the 500 and the 490. It's just ceramic magnets and, you know, wound hot, but they do it potted and covered. So it's been wax sealed and then, you know, with a cover on it. So I have those in all the V's.
Show me one of your V's, man, because did it take a while to get used to the shape of it?
It's way easier than you might think.
Is it? Yeah. Okay, so he's got a red, white pickguard. Wow, that neck looks like 40-50% wider than the Strat you just picked up.
Oh, interesting.
Not just from looking. Maybe it's not. Maybe the strings are spaced even smaller, so it wouldn't even matter. Yeah, so it's easier to play than it appears.
You just kind of Michael Schenker.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm thinking.
Two legs, and yeah, man. I mean, they're super comfortable. Really,
are they?
At the end of the day, I mean, I don't know. You don't want to sit for long hours. It is kind of a stress position, but dude, these are so light.
Yeah.
I was talking to, I think this last tour, like, you know, Petrelli like goes through a number of guitars during the show, and 2 or 3 of them are Les Pauls, and I don't think his main black one is that heavy, but he was playing, you know, the white Les Paul Custom, like the kind Randy Rhoads used to play. And he's like, oh, this thing's a bear. And I was like, dude, feel this. He's like, you know, because we're both over 50. It's a 2.5 hour show.
Oh, I like playing the SG for that reason. The ISG is It's weird because and you don't have that with the V where the headstock is heavier than the body, but on the SG you do.
Sorry, you're saying the SG is weird?
Well, the headstock is, the neck is heavier than the body a little bit. So it takes some getting used to. I love that guitar though. It's so light and it just sounds wonderful. Yeah. And then what is that on the floor there?
These are the SGs. So this is a custom shop.
That's a pretty guitar, man. It's a white one with a black pick guard.
And then this is a factory model. They're both the 61 reissue.
It's thin neck.
Yeah.
I have the same one. It's wonderful.
I think the neck on the custom shop one feels a little chunkier. And there's some design elements that are completely different in the custom shop one than the factory one. I always enjoyed the tone of the factory one better, but Gibson, the white one came with burst buckers, but now it has something else that they custom wound at the custom shop that, like, if I have a friend over, Jeff, and he basically the white one is the one that is like, oh yeah, this one sounds really good, But I was doing an AC/DC tribute with some friends of mine where they, oddly enough, they had me play the Angus parts, and
shocking.
I but I still love playing the red one. They're both great, and so sorry, what were you going to say? What you're asking me about? What?
The pickups in the standard one, I have 57s in mine, which I absolutely love. What is in yours? In my SG?
Yeah, it's the 57s.
Yeah, I love those, man.
I don't know. I'm not sure why I started feeling like they're a little, in that guitar, they're a little dull and the output's low, but maybe it's just because all my other guitars have higher output pickups.
And what is that red one behind you? Oh, is it a Reverend or something?
Oh, that's the Brian May guitar.
Yeah, there you go, man.
For the Queen gig.
That's cool. Yeah. And who makes that?
Brian May Guitars.
Oh, it's literally his own company. He released it.
I don't know what factory in Korea or China makes it, but yeah, it's doing the job. I'm actually taking it to a repair guy this week because it has a 0 fret. It's like, so the 0 fret, the idea there is that the nut is the 0 fret is where the nut would be on a regular guitar, and then the nut is behind that and really just serves to align this, to keep the strings in the right place. But the 0 fret is where the tension of the string actually ends, and the ringing part of the string ends. And so the idea is that the string is on the same thing all the time. It's not like the open string is hitting a piece of plastic. The open string is hitting a fret, just like if you were fretting a string, it's hitting a fret. But somehow that fret is taken all the way to the string all day. It's already like pitted. Wow. So like severely pitted. I was like, if I keep grinding it down, you're going to wind up with nothing there. So I'm going to have that one fret replaced with a stainless steel fret. And it's interesting because, like, you look at Brian May, because I'm all into this Queen thing now. He built that guitar with his dad.
His dad, yeah.
And to this day, like he like, no matter what else happens, he's like, just give me that guitar back. If something else goes wrong, he's like, just give me that. I just want that guitar. And I think that emotional attachment to it is really interesting because, there's all kinds of things about that design that are quirky that, you could do much more simply, but if he talks about the guitar, he's just like, it's like, so, he tells you, just why it's the most awesome thing ever and stuff like that. Wow. And I'm just like, I'm like, yes, for him, he made it. That's his baby, man. And I think he got to do it with his dad.
How cool is that?
So awesome,
And he's Brian May. It's not like he got to do this and he's like,
God,
humping cover band.
The amount of work those guys did is just amazing. But the only other one that is probably, so then I have Paul and it's fine. It needs work. And then, but this is this would be the one that the Strat in question when I got the Kitaro gig, and it's an American made Floyd Rose classic.
Yeah.
Made in 91. And this is when Fender had a deal, had first made a licensing deal with Floyd Rose and was actually putting a Floyd Rose on a factory Fender. So it wasn't retrofitted. It came this way.
Have you played that a lot? It looks mint.
Yeah, I did all the Kotaro tours with it.
That's wild.
I was not very hard on it. I hadn't gotten into wearing big belt buckles and wearing the finish off my guitars or anything.
That's great.
But yeah, and I still love this guitar. If I really objectively A/B it with other guitars that I have now, I can hear the I could kick myself for kind of a blind loyalty to it through certain parts of my career.
But you always grow and change.
It's just like Brian with that one guitar he built with his dad. You got to dance with the one that brung you at some point. So that's what that guitar is for me. So
very cool.
Yeah. So there's that, and then I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish up.
Oh no, I was going to say, so there aren't that many of those in circulation, and this good buddy of mine, who I had taught him some lessons and kind of helped him when he was launching. He was kind of restructuring his career from something outside of music to now he runs the music program for like a large kind of TV church kind of thing. And so kind of as a thank you, he found another. I told him, I was like, yeah, I think I like maple necks better than rosewood now. And so he found one on eBay and sent it to me.
That's really cool.
So it's like the exact same guitar.
That is wild. That's really nice.
Yeah.
That's really nice.
And this one is I guess a 90. So from the year before, the one I came up on.
That's really cool, man, to get a gift like that.
Yeah, it's amazing. So it's really nice. Anyway, and then just if you want to keep going on gear, I'm talking to you now from my studio, and so I've just kind of set this up.
And your mic has been awesome, by the way. Thank you for setting that up. It's been so clean.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
Yeah,
so I've just spent a lot of time since we moved to Jersey setting up this basement studio, and I have 4 really good heads. I have my 1987X, which is a 50-watt plexi. I have a JCM 800, which is it's the last of the 800s. The 2205, the Michael Schenker amp, which I actually just found out that the 1987 is the other Michael Schenker amp. So all the early UFO records were made with either a pig nose.
That's wild.
Yeah. Or a 1987X, a 50-watt plexi.
Wait a minute, a little tiny pig nose?
Yeah, he used that for rhythm sounds on some stuff.
That's
you can hear it if you listen now. Go back and listen to Only You Can Rock Me, Rock Me.
What a good song. All that stuff was just absurd.
And then he transitioned to the 2205, which is what they call a split channel 800. So it's got a clean and a dirty channel and a reverb. And I think that they took this design came before and served as like the seed for the Jubilee design. So the Jubilee design has this, you have the ability to engage like a little bit of a boost in the rhythm channel. And I don't know, it's just, but this amp, was never the same. Like all the I don't know, the 6 years that they made it, that the design was changing the whole time. And the first 3 years, they apparently were really bad. So like when you get one, you have to get a later one, and you have to check the serial number, and then you can test it by pulling one of the preamp tubes and like all this stuff. It has an effects loop that barely works because it's like in the wrong, it's in the wrong part of the circuit.
God, that's bad quality control.
Yeah. But
it has a useless effects loop.
But dude, this is the amp. So I have the 2205. Then I have an EVH 5150 Mark III, Fender manufactured EVH, which the kids like. And then I have a Black Star HT50 head, which is kind of their take on a 2-channel 800, which is kind of, it's kind of good. It's sterile, a little less character than a proper Marshall, but it definitely will do the job. And I have it all wired into an ISO chamber with Jeff McErlane's 412 cabinet.
Well, he can't use it in his house, I can tell you that much. That's for sure. I have that cabinet, which has a combo of like blackbacks, which is an odd choice, in vintage 30s, and then I have the cabinet I used on all the Kitaro tours, which is a 1922. It's a real small 212 with just 75 watt speakers in it, and so I just spend a lot of time hooking this up, but I'm like kind of ready to go for just tracking at home for guest solos, because I've done some solos on other people's records over the last few years. Did one for Dee Dee Verney from Overkill, and I did one for Metal Church a few years ago, and it's fun to do, and I like recording. I also like producing other guitar players. It's fun to have guys in and help them. Do you do that occasionally?
Yeah, I mean, it's something. It's kind of an outgrowth of working on Daredevil Squadron. Daredevil Squadron's a 2-guitar band, so I obviously the other guitar player, Aurelian, he doesn't need my help because he's complete badass. But it's just a fun process to be there together sometimes and kind of help each other get to a good spot in terms of the tone and all that. So I enjoy the process.
Hey, who's had the biggest influence on your life?
Captain Kirk.
Of course.
I mean, that's. I think the obvious answer is my parents. That would be the. Yeah, that's it.
Parents.
Yeah.
You have any hobbies or interests outside of music, Angus?
Well, I take them all into music, so they may start outside of music, but I bring them all in. I mean, I just love. I've been a long time fan of science fiction, both in the literature and film and TV. So specifically, like Star Trek, but a lot of it for me, it's always interesting because the fundamental story of most of your great science fiction is that kind of like person in ordinary circumstances who is in some way discovers that they're like, it's like the Matrix. You remember the original Matrix movie? I'm unrealized in my job in all this. And then suddenly greatness is, he discovers that he is the one, something like that. I think that hero's arc that exists in most of that kind of older sci-fi. But my dad was a huge fan of Philip K. Dick, and I just those books are all about like paranoid schizophrenia, and so I don't know why I bring that up, but I think that there's just a lot of richness to all that stuff that's more than just laser guns and kind of how cool the tech is and stuff like that. I'm I nerd out on that stuff.
Have you ever read Haruki Murakami?
No.
All right, so he's a fiction writer, but I always look at his stuff as science fiction because he's an incredible writer. I mean, just fantastic. He's out of Japan, and all his books are translated into like literally like dozens of languages. He's won multiple. He's just a great writer, but I always look at his books as science fiction because the things that go on in them are not they're not normal. So I always look at him as, and I'm not a guy that likes science fiction, but I like his
send me a link for that.
Yeah,
there's a couple other writers.
Great writer. I've
been huge fans of William Gibson. I like, when Neuromancer and Count Zero and all those came out, and then Louis Shiner is another guy that he writes sci-fi and speculative fiction, but a lot of it is to do with music because he's from a musical background. He has a book called Glimpses that it's about a guy who he's a stereo repair guy. He was a drummer. Now he's a stereo repair guy living in Texas. And he sits there one day fantasizing about what he knows about the Beatles trying to record Let It Be, and how Let It Be was originally supposed to be a very stripped back record. And then they recorded it, and then it all fell apart for them. And then the tracks all wound up with the producer, right? Like Phil Ramone, somebody, and then he added all the strings and all the lushness and all that stuff, and you wound up with this very, kind of fully produced, even bombastic at points, kind of version of Long and Winding Road. So this guy's sitting there, he repairs a stereo, and then he's sitting there and he's zoning out, and he's looking at some pictures of the Beatles, and he's imagining what like the Let It Be record would be like if it had actually been finished in the way that they originally intended. And then it starts playing out the speakers in his room.
Oh, the way it would have been. Yeah.
And so then he records, so then he does it again and he records it and he sends it to like a guy, and then like everybody's like, where did you get this? And so then he sets it, and he starts making all this money releasing bootlegs of the albums that he recorded. So he like does Let It Be, and then he does the Celebration of the Lizard by the Doors,
Jim Morrison,
which is like supposed to be a half album epic that never got done because he was too wasted to do it. And then like whatever the Smile record was actually supposed to be if Brian Wilson hadn't gone completely nuts. And at the end of the book, he's working on the House of the New Rising Sun, or First Rays of the New Rising Sun. It would have been the album that Hendrix was, the album everyone thinks Hendrix was supposed to have completed. And so this guy writes this fictional scene between this dude talking to Hendrix, and I don't know. That guy's an amazing writer.
And what's his name?
Louis Shiner, Shiner. That book is called Glimpses. But so if I should get around to reading another book, I think the last book I read was The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho.
Yeah, I know who that guy is. Toughest decision you ever had to make, or hardest thing you ever had to do?
Well, toughest decision I had was like picking my first home. I think that was like, God, man, that was just like the amount of stress,
a lot of anxiety in that.
Yeah, right. Just because it took. I mean, we moved on that later than a lot of people would have. New York being a very unique real estate environment. So our decision to kind of move out of the city and buy a house, that was phenomenally stressful. But I mean, I think all these questions, man, I can't, there's no way, I know we're doing a guitar podcast, but there's no way to undermine, the decisions we make involving our personal lives are the ones that, have the most impact. So, your perspective changes when you have a child, the challenges of, family life, all those things, they trump most of the career concerns. I've just, in the last few years, if we wanted to talk about the career decisions, I think, I've just been through, I spent 6 years subbing on Rock of Ages on Broadway, and it was a very unique experience in that it was a Broadway show, but the band were on stage, so it was satisfying some of that performance element for me. And then, but I've had other opportunities that came out of that were not right for me, and I had trouble saying no to one of those opportunities, and so I kind of took something on that I probably should have reconsidered. So I took it on, and it didn't work out. And so then just recently I got offered. I still have, and that happens all the time. There are things that don't work out. Like we've all done.
Absolutely.
Gigs, right?
With everything.
And then more recently, because I still have, very great connections, with people that are still active in the Broadway community, I got offered the chair to open a Broadway show. And it just, I had to really look at it, and I just knew it wasn't going to be the right move for me. Part of what was at stake was just they lock you into a rehearsal period where you can't really take off and all these kinds of things. And my main thing is SongDivision, and what we do is involves traveling probably 3 or 4 times a month. So I'm always going to be on the move, and if I'm not actually on the job, I'll be managing the people that are. So I had to say no to that, or I wanted to say no to that. So those were some interesting things that happened recently.
That's good, man. Yeah, you gotta. That's your own business. You got to focus on that, man. That's gonna.
Yeah.
And last question, man. And I really appreciate all your time. You've been so generous. What's been your biggest change in your personality over the last 10 years, Angus? And how much of this change has been deliberate and intentional, and how much is just a part of aging?
Well, I've tried to make a conscious effort to be kinder, and a lot of that has to do with just recognizing where things have nothing to do with me. Like I think Roger Waters said something that, like, you just can't overestimate the level of how self-centered you are as a child, like, or how at the level of seeing things only as having to do with you when you're small, and the way that we shed that as we get older, and understanding where you can't take on this, if there's negative energy coming from here or there, in the room. I was talking about, like, my first Kitaro experience, like, where there were frictions with the people I was working with. It had nothing to do with me. Like, yeah. I could be, perfectly deserving of being there. And, if somebody needs to go through their thing, like, that's their business. And if you can do you have to stand up for yourself, but you also have to know when it's really not about you, and just let it go. Not everything is about me. So I think that's the thing. And in that, I find that, I try not to be dismissive of how other people approach things, like, even though when they're not my way. So, part of what we do in SongDivision is just, reinforce that it's like, look, I may, know for a fact that Paranoid is the greatest song ever written.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that for a fact that, Boys Are Back in Town was the best song that was ever written.
Right.
Like these two realities exist in the same space, and I think so. I try to be accepting of all that stuff, and I've always had a kind of a quick wit, and it borders on a sharp tongue, and I have to recognize my place in a situation, because if you come at things from being insecure, you don't recognize when you have the power in the situation, right? So you're sitting there thinking like, I could lash out at this person or whatever, but it's inconsequential because I'm not the person that's being looked up to. It's like, no, like you are, a person of weight in these situations, and the level to which you can be supportive and kind to the other people that you're working with is really important. It goes a long way towards helping them, and in turn their ability to help you in the future. Yeah,
man, that's good stuff. Good for you. I would imagine you're having a kid probably impacts that, being kinder too, because you see the innocence of your, especially with a girl, man. You can't, like, I had 2 boys first. You can't like raise your voice with a girl. It's just not cool. They fall apart.
Oh, well, they're all very individual, but I have learned a massive amount from my daughter. Yes.
Yeah, I did too. Hey, listen, man, I can't thank you enough for your time. Let me tell people how to find you and support you. First of all, if you are interested, it's Angus Clark. That's real simple. ANGUSCLARK. And he's got a website. It's angusclark.com, right?
Yes.
Okay. Few things. First of all, if you are in a corporation or some sort of organization that's looking to develop some team building skills, some leadership skills, some corporate events, get a hold of Angus through SongDivision.com. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
And he's real good at doing that, and he's been doing it a long time, and he's got a lot of responsibility in managing others and a whole team that do that. Also, TrueFire, man. How many courses do you have at TrueFire?
I think it's 10 at this point.
That's awesome.
And I have 3 more coming out this year.
So they like you.
Oh, yeah. I love such a great team at TrueFire, and it's been just a great experience. Learned a lot from doing it, and I love hearing back from students about the results that they get from any of my courses. So it's great.
That's awesome. So check out Angus on TrueFire.com. He's got 10 courses, 3 more coming out. And go to his website, because he also has like where he's gigging and what shows he's got coming up. And support Trans-Siberian Orchestra. Go check them out on the road, and tell Angus to play more cowbell. Do you have like an Instagram, any social media stuff you want to give out?
Yeah, I think everything is Angus Clark GTR. So Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, I think they're all the same, Angus Clark GTR. And then there's some affiliated pages for Daredevil Squadron, which is Daredevil Squadron has one album out called Out of the Sun, which you can get on all your streaming services. And we have a couple of singles out for a new record that we've recorded. And we're hoping to release... What's that?
I like that title, Out of the Sun.
Out of the Sun.
Yeah, it's cool.
Thank you.
And will that be on your main site or in your social media stuff?
There'll be links to it. You can find it. You can find Daredevil Squadron. But as I said, it's iTunes, Spotify. You can find Daredevil Squadron there.
Great. Support Angus's stuff. Just check out Daredevil Squadron at a minimum. Stream them. And that's it. Anything else I missed?
No, that's it.
Man,
and, I mean, I'll be in Australia and New Zealand playing with the Ultimate Queen Celebration featuring Mark Martel last week of August. So be nice to visit down under. And I'll be it'll probably have happened by the time this comes out. I'm playing some shows with the Rock of Ages band We're doing one this weekend. But then November and December, Trans-Siberian Orchestra West Coast tour. Dates have not been announced while we're recording this. They may be announced by the time this comes out. But
great.
Always great to see the fans out for the TSO.
So check out Angus, November, December with Trans-Siberian Orchestra, and he's with the West Coast guys. And he's a hell of a good guitar player. Check him out online. You'll see for yourself. Man, thank you very much for everything. I really appreciate it. Totally generous with your time. And I thank you for the mic. Oh, my God. Your feed was so clear. Oh, my God. It makes a huge difference. Anyway, man, thank you.
Cool.
Everybody, thank you so much for listening. You're welcome. My pleasure. Hope you enjoyed this interview as much as I did. So many thanks to Angus Clark for spending time with us. Check Angus out online and support him at Trans-Siberian Orchestra. Check out his courses on TrueFire.com. And if you're looking for some team building or some cool corporate stuff, go to SongDivision.com and get a hold of Angus. And make sure you go to everyonelovesguitar.com and sign up to our newsletter list right now. And remember, most importantly, that happiness is a choice, so choose wisely. Be nice, go play your guitar, and have some fun. Till next time, peace and love, everybody. I'm out. We hope you enjoyed this show. If you did, subscribe to the Everyone Loves Guitar podcast, and you can do this online at everyonelovesguitar.com or on iTunes. And if you like the show, please leave us a 5-star positive review. The more 5-star reviews we get, the higher our show ranks, and higher rankings mean we get to continue speaking with cool, interesting guests on our show. We'll see you on the next episode, and until then, keep playing your guitar and have fun making music.